allow me the pleasure of introducing one of the most amazing ladies that I know, Bonnie Hochman-Rothel. Bonnie has not only been a lawyer for 30 years of litigation and mediation experience with 3 national and international law firms. She is a certified mediator and has litigated nationally in federal and state courts. She has served as a moderator in numerous national panels, and we are truly honored to have her mediate this event. So without further ado, Bonnie Hochman-Rothel.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for showing up here tonight. We are so excited to have this as one of our opening events at the Cove, and even more excited to have every single candidate running for president of the commission here. So I am honored and touched by the presence of all of them here. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce each candidate. I'm going to talk a little bit about the decorum and the ground rules for today's debate. And I am also going to talk about just a little bit of an introduction about each of the candidates. I did bring my gavel, just in case we need it. Hopefully we won't need it today. But before we begin, let me just introduce each of the candidates. I had them in alphabetical order by first name. So Brian Klaas, you're first. Brian Klaas is a lifelong resident of Charles County. He grew up in Indian Head and graduated from Lackey High School in 1983. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy and as a chief petty officer served aboard 2 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines. His last duty station in the Navy was as a recruit company commander, where he was selected to be one of the Navy's first company commanders to integrate the training of males and females together in boot camp. He attended the University of Central Florida, utilizing the GI Bill, and completing his studies, accepted a job as an investment specialist with Charles Schwab. He worked for Schwab managing offices in Washington, D.C. and Reston, Virginia. He started his own business in 2001 and owns and runs this business today. Brian and his wife, Erin, are the proud owners of a Maryland-certified tree farm where they have planted over 110,000 trees in the past 20 years. Brian has served for 12 years on the Charles County Forest Conservancy Board. He's on the board of the directors of the Chamber of Commerce and served as the chair of the Military Alliance Council. Brian and Erin live in Nanjemoy with their 3 children, of which at least one of them I saw here today. Welcome, Brian. Henry Thompson. Henry Thompson is a La Plata resident. He attended La Plata High School, Baylor University, San Antonio College, St. Philip's College, Alamo Area College, Brayton Field of Texas A&M Systems. He served in the government, both in the Army Reserves and as active duty Army. He has been a federal civil service employee. He is retired as a perinatal pediatric specialist, and he has a total of 41 years of U.S. government service. He has lived with his family in Charles County for multiple generations, and it is our honor to have Henry Thompson here with us today. Thank you. Peter Murphy. Peter Murphy earned a Bachelor's of Science degree from the American University in Distributed Sciences and an MS in Biology from George Washington University, as well as an Educational Studies, EDS, in counseling. After a career as a microbiologist at the National Institute of Health and Science and a math teacher at General Smallwood Middle School, where my daughter attends, he moved into government service. He is the current president of the Board of County Commissioners for Charles County and has served in this position since December 2014. During his distinguished career, he has served as a member of the Climate Change Commission. He served as a member of the Maryland House of Delegates from 2007 to 2014. He has served on numerous committees such as Health and Government Operations, Insurance Subcommittees, Rural Healthcare Work Group, Ways and Means Committee, including an Educational Subcommittee, a Transportation Subcommittee, Finance Resources Subcommittee, Revenue Subcommittee, Joint Committee on Healthcare Delivery and Financing, and was on the House Chair of the Charles County Delegation. Mr. Murphy has served as a member of the Commission to Study Southern Maryland Transportation Needs, the Commission on Civic Literacy, and the Tri-County Council for Southern Maryland and the Early Childhood Development Advisory Council. Mr. Murphy previously acted as a Director of Mediation Services for PG County. He's a past member of various boards. Mr. Murphy has also served as a House Maryland Field Representative for U.S. Senator Paul Sarbanes of Maryland. Mr. Murphy is a longtime activist for foster children and has fostered children himself. He is also the proud father of 2 daughters and the grandfather of 4. Welcome, Mr. Murphy. And last but not least, just last alphabetically for now, but we're going to change up the order each round, Reuben Collins. Reuben Collins is an accomplished lawyer, a community leader, and an author. He earned his jurisprudence doctorate from District of Columbia School of Law and a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. He is also a graduate of Henry Lackey High School. For the past 20 years, Mr. Collins has run the daily operation of a successful legal practice with emphasis on corporate and small business transactions. He has served the Charles County government for 8 years. He was elected as County Commissioner of District 3 in 2006 and was appointed Vice President of the Board of Commissioners during his 2nd term in office. Amongst his success, Mr. Collins created a summer youth employment program, the Waldorf Beautification Project, the Po-Monkey Redevelopment Project, the Waldorf Sidewalk Initiative. He took the lead in shepherding passage of the county's first minority business enterprise program, the Rural Housing Improvement Initiative, the Waldorf Urban Redevelopment Corridor, Light Rail Initiative, and the Charles County Housing Authority. On behalf of the Cove and the citizens of Charles County, I'd like to thank each of you for participating and being here today. Thank you all. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about the decorum we expect today and the ground rules. My lovely daughter here is going to serve as my assistant. And for each round, she's going to pick a name out of the hat, and that's the person that's going to have an opportunity to speak first. We're going to start with opening statements. I'd like the opening statements to be no more than 2 minutes because we have a lot of questions to ask. For each question, we're going to ask each candidate to have no more than 2 minutes. The shorter you go, the more questions we can get to, and the longer we will have at the end for the audience to ask some questions and also for you to have time for a nice closing argument. I'd like the closing arguments to be a little longer. During the debate, I would like nobody to interrupt. That's why I have my trustworthy gavel here. If anybody interrupts another candidate, I do intend to use it. And no, I'm not a school teacher. But I do expect everybody to realize that today's debate is not only recorded live, but it is also being photographed and recorded by several people in the audience. And there are many children in the audience, my own minor daughter included. So I expect decorum to be of the utmost appropriateness. And without further ado, Ms. Faith, if you can pick out the candidates' names one at a time, and that will determine the order for the opening statements. After that, for each round of questioning, she will do the same, and we'll pick out the order for those questions. I also apologize because we had a microphone faux pas, so we are sharing one microphone. So Ms. Faith will hand the microphone, and that will also ensure nobody interrupts, so it's actually a good thing.
First will be Henry Thompson.
Hello, I am Henry Thompson, and I believe I should be the next president of your Charles County Commissioners. You, the tax-paying citizens, need a chief financial officer of your Charles County government. This is an important position and requires the correct person. I believe my past accomplishments prepare me to be the correct person this county needs. And here are some of my accomplishments. I grew up in a military family and settled in La Plata in 1964, since Southern Maryland was home to my grandparents and family. The first job I had was delivering the Washington Star newspaper across the northern part of La Plata. While attending school in La Plata, became interested in the medical field and also took courses at the Physicians Memorial Hospital, and then worked part-time at the hospital while going to and graduating from high school. I then joined the Army and in the medical field became a respiratory specialist, traveling through Texas and many Pacific Rim countries. After my military service, I obtained a civil service position and continued my education, attending San Antonio College, Baylor University, St. Philip's College, Alamo Community College District, and also the Brayton Field of Texas A&M University. I also passed several national accreditations, leading to my becoming a perinatal pediatric specialist. In this position, I dealt with families' most valuable commodity, their children and infants in intensive care units. While on ventilators and in critical condition, this is a very stressful environment in which I had to handle on a daily basis. Along the way, I also served as a firefighter and EMT, which led to an opportunity to run for an election to a board of directors for the fire department. That also led to another election to president of the board of directors. While administering the department of 40 personnel, I researched and wrote several and also submitted numerous grants through all levels of county, state, and federal agencies. And I also was a leader of innovative fundraising for the fire department. I recently retired from federal civil service after 41 years of service and now would like to serve my family's local community. I believe my past experiences prepare me for this next phase of service. That service should be president of Charles County Commissioners, a position which requires common sense and experience and the ability to supervise others, promotion of economic development, and the ability to lead your county government in the right direction. Don't forget, you also have a $401 million budget that needs to be managed. Thank you for listening to my past accomplishments, and please make a wise decision on this election day 2018.
Thank you. The next opening remarks will come from
Reuben Collins.
Good evening. The opening bio neglected to recognize my wife, Deborah Collins, who's here with me today, and the fact that we have 3 children, 1 grown adult, and 2 children that we're raising. We moved back to the Bryans Road area, but I wanted to share that real quickly. Well, thank you. Always a good thing to have family. Why are we here? We're here to discuss the future of our county. My goal as the next commissioner president is to jumpstart our local economy. It will require forward thinking that will set a new paradigm on how the county manages its budget. That will be done by making a massive commitment to public infrastructure projects that will get our county out of the annual crapshoot approach to projecting funding for our county workforce that includes public school employees, public safety, and county government workers. A massive public works investment will also make it possible to directly address the county's homelessness and affordable housing issue. It will provide additional resources to expand youth services within the county. I'm looking forward to this discussion today about the future of our county. Thank you very much.
And the next opening remarks will come from
Peter Murphy.
And I just want to take a moment to again thank Bonnie very much for sponsoring this tonight. And this is a good example of small businesses that are starting to grow in Charles County. So please don't make this your last time visiting here. Okay, let's support our small businesses. Thank you. You know, the first question we always get asked is, why are we running? And there are a couple of reasons of why I'm running. Number one, okay. Well, let me, okay, thank you. We're going to go, okay. Does that cut into my time? So, very briefly, we have an amazing story to tell in Charles County. We have a good story to tell. If I didn't run, who would tell that story? And not only have we done things over those last 3.5 years, but it goes back even further than that. So that's number one. And I hope tonight you get to hear a lot of the great things that are going on. Number two, and it was mentioned earlier, one of the most important things that we do is to manage a $400 million budget. And that supports our Board of Education, that supports our Sheriff's Department, that supports our Health Department, and so forth. I am so proud to be able to stand here today to tell you that Charles County is in sound financial condition. We have not seen this kind of financial situation in years. So much so, thank you. I mean, I'm telling you that, and you'll hear us say, because we're so proud of it, for the very first time in the history of Charles County, we've got the AAA bond rating across the board. That means an awful lot to what we're able to accomplish. I want to be able to maintain that financial status. And the third thing is, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, I hope, this evening, the kinds of projects that we have going, I want to see them completed. I want to see the Western Parkway completed. I want to see the $13 million that we just got put into our budget to upgrade 301 and Route 5. I want to make sure that that happens in Charles County, that that money doesn't go off the table. I want to make sure that all the schools that we are upgrading, and they've been sitting out on the CIP for years. We brought those forward, and I'm going to give credit mostly to Commissioner Stewart here, who made sure that we brought those schools forward so we can modernize our schools that are 40 and 50 years old. I want to make sure that continues. And so there are many more projects. Now my time's about up, and I hope we'll get to them tonight. But I'm proud of where we are. I'm proud of what we've done in just 3.5 years. But I want to be here to make sure that we can finish the job for you and for our county, for our students, our police officers, and everybody else that calls Charles County home. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Klass.
Good evening, and I'd like to thank the Cove very much for hosting this forum tonight. I'd like to thank my wife, my mom, my sister, all of my family for being here, and friends. Elections are about choices, and I'm running for office because in my role as a lifelong resident of Charles County, I've been able to work in a number of places. I've seen the world when I served the service. But the most important thing that I am is I'm a father and I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm running because I believe that the vision for Charles County can be better. I look at the issues that most of us here in Charles County face every day. I spend the mornings in Waldorf, 5 o'clock at the park and rides, and we've got the forgotten people, 77% of who have to commute out of Charles County every day for the high wages that they need in order to live in Charles County. How do we focus on improving the quality of life for those people? Those are the people that I work for. Those are the people I want to provide solutions for. We've got 3 wonderful children, and our children have wonderful friends that they're going through the school system with. It would be a shame that after they finish their schools, we have to export them out of Charles County because we don't have employment opportunities for them here where we live. We have to start looking at new models of how we live in Charles County. We've done tremendous at building new homes. Residential we have down pat. But what are we doing about the people that live here as it relates to their employment options? We need to rethink the mode of where we live versus where we work. That is why I focus so hard on economic development. I spent the last 3 years doing everything possible to try to bring jobs to our employment centers. We have 2 major arteries in and out of Charles County, 3015 and Route 210. Those are the corridors that we need to lessen traffic on. That will be done by bringing employment opportunities back to Charles County, being business friendly, and focusing like a laser on bringing quality employment, career-focused jobs to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, all four of you. Thank you very much, and thanks for keeping within the time frames. We're now going to move into the questions, and some of the questions are questions that I gave each of the candidates an opportunity to pose a question or two to me that they would like for me to ask today. Others are questions that I came up with, and a few questions are some questions that my daughter came up with. So I'm very excited to ask the questions today. I'm going to be handing the mic down so you don't have to get up from your seats. Faith will serve as our runner. And our very first question is going to be posed first to
Peter Murphy.
So the question is, and it was actually the same question he posed in his opening remarks, why do you want the position of County Commissioner President?
So this will be a much shorter answer, I presume. Well, that's right. No, I appreciate that very much. It goes back to something that I think I started to say a little bit ago. And that is that we've accomplished an awful lot in Charles County in just these last 3.5 years. And certainly you're going to hear a lot of issues tonight. But the important thing I think to keep in mind is the bigger picture. And when you sit in the position of a county commissioner, you have to look at the larger picture. It is true, and we look at the things like economic development as an example. It's a very important issue. But until we solve our overcrowded schools, until we solve our transportation issues, and until we serve how we grow, it's going to be very difficult to bring people in. But I will tell you, despite that, since we've been in office, we were able to bring in Greenberg and Gibbons that are going to be developing a major development up at the north end of Charles County, the gateway to Charles County. We were able to negotiate with Lennar. And it's no longer St. Charles City. I don't know whether you know this or not, but St. Charles is no longer owned by St. Charles Company. It's owned by Lennar. And we were able to negotiate fewer homes because we have to address our transportation issue. We have to address schools and overcrowded schools. My point is, there are so many different issues here, and you have to be able to look at the whole picture. We've been doing that. I would like to be able to continue that, because if we started to negotiate this, we want to be able to continue with these companies and this process in a way that makes sure that Charles County gets the best that we can out of them. And so that's critical. What we don't want to have happen is to have to start all over again with some of these companies that have come in. So there's many more. One of the things I will say, we talk about economic development. Charles County just got opportunity zone. We asked for 3 opportunity zones: Indian Head, our work in Waldorf, and the Waldorf Station. That's going to bring in millions of dollars of federal funds into Charles County. We did that by working with our governor and the state of Maryland to bring that here. So that will help tremendously in economic development, and it matters that you have the kinds of relationships that are necessary to bring that kind of stuff here. So that's just a small sample of some of the things, but the message is we need to continue the good work that's already been started and the projects that are already in place. Thank you.
Next up is Ruben Collins.
If the people allow me the opportunity to hold the gavel for the county, I will, as the very first measure of the board, seek the initiation of having the board meet on more than once every 2 weeks. but to actually address the need and to create a working board of county commissioners that are meeting on a regular basis, because the commitment should be for our board to ensure that our economic security is in place and that we make a priority for our citizens to increase our commercial tax base. But that can't be done if our board is meeting on a part-time basis. It should be something where, again, we have a working board of commissioners that are totally committed to being champions for business development. That's the only way it's going to happen, and we have to have a measured and a full thought-through approach to how we want to initiate economic development. In my opinion, the direction should be through infrastructure projects, because that will jumpstart the economy and it will also provide jobs for our residents. Of course, it will be a board's decision, but I want to make it clear, my commitment is totally to ensuring that economic prosperity comes to our community and we provide more jobs for all of our citizens.
Next speaking will be Brian Claus.
Before deciding to run for county commissioner and clearing this with my wife, one of the things that really animated me to be more involved was the recent watershed conservation district that was just enacted here in Charles County. And the one thing that I felt was missing from that was I didn't feel like I was treated as a neighbor. Many of you in here that I see now were active in all of those meetings. And we made our voices heard. And in my opinion, we had zoning restrictions placed on us that were draconian in nature and did nothing to support economic development in the side of the county in which it was imposed. We have tremendous assets in western Charles County, which were devalued and put at risk with the removal of all of the commercial and industrial zoning around the airport and on the western side of Charles County. That's a message that goes out to business that you're not welcome here. And in a part of the county that needs that help the most, you don't come in and beat it over the head with a sledgehammer. So one thing that I see as a county commissioner president is setting an agenda that's more friendly to our residents, that respects the rights of its citizens and collaborates to find a good, viable solution to accomplish what all of us want: protect our environment and improve our quality of life. Thank you.
Last, we'll have Henry Thompson.
The importance of the board of the president for the board of commissioners for the county is we need to encourage business growth and corporations to come into the area. That provides good jobs for our young people and would make jobs and careers and stuff to keep our young people in this area. Every time they go out to Baltimore, Washington, D.C., or Northern Virginia to drive for 2 hours in the morning to work and 2 hours in the evening, that's non-productive time each day driving back and forth. Not to mention the times when there are accidents, bad weather, all kinds of other things that cause the traffic to be diverted off onto side streets and whatnot. That extends their time in the commute back and forth. All those times are non-productive hours. And over years and years that go by, we're coming out behind when all that goes on. We also have so many other issues with the transportation and whatnot, and we can't seem to get those solved. So the best thing to do is we need to start bringing in corporations and businesses into the area and create a more business-friendly environment. We need to be able to get good jobs here in the area and increase our tax base by doing that. Why do we want the tax base increased? That puts less of a burden on the homeowner and property owner. They don't have to pay as much each year if we have more and more businesses in the area. We desperately need that stuff to be done in the community, and I think the job of the president of the county commissioners is very important in that role. So please consider all those facts when you vote for the next president of the county commissioners.
Thank you all. The next question I would like you to keep to just a minute because it's a very simple question. All four of you have very, very distinguished careers, and all four of you have done so much for the county. I would like to know, in just a sentence or two, what you believe your the most important, significant contribution you've made to the county over the last 5 years. And the first candidate?
Reuben Collins.
The last 5 years? Okay, I would say within the last 5 years, the most significant accomplishment, and it's still ongoing, was working with the residents in Pamunkey, Maryland, to establish an actual historic district for the Pamunkey neighborhood. Pamunkey has traditionally been known and recognized as a bastion of African American economic status. And the idea of creating a historic district I thought was important because it provided an opportunity for the residents of that side of the county to learn more about the history there and to show an appreciation of the business acumen that existed in that part of the county.
Next will be Henry Thompson.
That's sort of a difficult question to ask, I guess. I had just worked until June of 2017 and was employed and traveled out of the county and out of the area for many years. But since I retired, though, and was making an effort toward running as office holder, I started taking training to prepare me for all of this. I think that training is worthwhile for the community because I'm able to move forward and make some plans as to what I need to do. I traveled to Arlington and several other places to take training. I also went to this Leadership Institute and took training. I've participated in some other activities on webinars and so forth. I've been up to Waldorf, to the training center up there, and I believe my training prepares me for the job that needs to be done.
Peter Murphy.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand. If start with all of you, to stand. Okay, great. Just a little easier to connect. The last 5 years, I would just say to my colleagues that one of the things that people don't understand perhaps about this position is this is about a 50 to 60 hour a week job, at least. Many times it's more than that. It's been a tremendous honor to be able to devote my time to this county. It's probably been the most meaningful work that I've ever done because you're here at the local level. And to be able to really impact lives. I think when you look at what are your accomplishments on that, it's how do you do this job in a responsible way, in a way that really produces results, and at the same time balance that with family and so forth. Brian mentioned something about talking to his wife before, and I think we all touch base with our families. When I talk to my grandsons, I talk to them and I said, you know, I'm not going to be able to make all your soccer games. I'm not going to be able to make some of your school functions. But this is important. And my oldest, who's 11, Bryce, was from the very beginning. When we talked about the kinds of things, and he's in a very overcrowded school, a school whose state-rated capacity is roughly 500. There are over 800 children in that school. And we talked about how do we work with that. His response is, you got to do this, Pa. You got to do it. And so that the accomplishment is how do you maintain that balance? And for those that get into this world of ours and the work that we do, it's our biggest challenge, is how do we still serve our constituents and also maintain some balance of family and friends as well. So I consider that actually an accomplishment. You can walk through with that. But at the same time, you know, being able to look back and to be able to mark the kinds of things you've done to better the community, and I'm very proud of some of those. So thank you.
Last speaking for this question is Brian Claus.
Without question, in the last 5 years, what I'm most proud of is the work that we've done down in Indian Head as the chairman of the Chambers Military Alliance Council. 3 years ago, we had a brand new election in Indian Head. We had a fresh new town council that was elected, but the town still looked poor. The base came to the Chambers New Military Alliance Council and said, in the eventual round of a BRAC, we are toast. If a decision maker drives through Indian Head, it's easy for them to say, close it down, the community doesn't care. I am here to tell you that in 3 years, we have partnered with the Department of Commerce, we have partnered with the county, and we have partnered with the town of Indian Head. And we have brought fiber into the town of Indian Head. We received a $200,000 grant from Commerce. The county did provide $67,000. The town provided $30,000. We have the College of Southern Maryland that is now going to establish a presence in the town of Indian Head. We are demolishing old and vacant and blighted buildings. And we have brought in, through the Chamber's efforts, working with the town, a world-class local developer, Mid-Atlantic Development with Triumph Development, to establish the Velocity Center, a collaborative center that the base will now bring facilities out into our town and integrate with our community once again. I'm very excited about that, and good things ahead for Indian Head. Thank you.
All right, the National Marine Sanctuary designation for Mallows Bay will likely mean a tremendous boost to tourism in this county. Is this a good thing or a bad thing, and do you support it?
First speaking will be Peter Murphy.
Thank you. We absolutely support it. The Board of County Commissioners came out early in support of NOAA's efforts to designate Mallows Bay as a National Marine Sanctuary. To be very clear about this, this was initiated from NOAA. It did not come initially from the Board of County Commissioners. But when that opportunity came our way, that we could have a National Marine Sanctuary in Charles County, will be the first one in 17 years in the United States. I want you to know that our emails and our phones ran off the hook from people all over the world, excited about the possibility of that. So yes, we've supported NOAA all the way through this process because of what it will bring to Charles County. And it does have tremendous potential for economic development in our area as well. We talk a lot, people talk a lot about economic development and bringing businesses and so forth to Charles County, and we've done our part to bring them. But in addition to that, there's tourism. It's an area that has been overlooked for decades in Charles County. What we did when we first got into office, we created a new department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism because we see that as a major economic driver here in Charles County. We're only an hour away from the nation's capital. In fact, in the Smithsonian Institution magazine, they advertise Mallows Bay. They encourage people to come to Charles County. So it's an excellent idea. We have a good relationship. We've been working with NOAA for this. NOAA started this 5 years ago. We've been working very closely with them and with the governor's office as well. We have a great relationship with the governor because it will rest with him eventually as to whether or not approves this. But we're very much in favor of this. We're also working with the Nanjemoy Volunteer Fire Department to give them the equipment they need to make sure that people are safe as they visit that park. And also, our tourism department is working very closely to be able to really promote that park. So not only will it put us on the map in that area, but it will certainly boost some of the, in terms of dollars coming into the county, and we certainly look to see how it will help Indian Head as well. So I absolutely support the Mallows Bay effort. I'm very happy that we finally got everybody on board to support the alternative that is now before, well, actually is out now, will be coming before the governor. So yes, I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Next speaking is Reuben Collins.
The county initiated approval on Mallows Bay during my second term as a county commissioner. It was part of many initiatives that during that period the county addressed to increase opportunities for tourism. So I'm absolutely in support of it. But I would only add that in addition to showing initial support for any tourism projects, it's the responsibility of the board to also recognize that you must put in place the amenities that allow those that would be appreciative of these opportunities to have that opportunity to enjoy a Mallows Bay or other wonderful places within our community. Too often we seem to fall short by providing those opportunities that create economic development opportunities across the board. So yes, I'm in total support of the continued development of Mallows Bay, but I would only encourage as we move forward that we also recognize that merely putting out the project is only one part of the actual program itself.
Brian Claus will now answer this question.
I was a very early supporter of Mallows Bay, the designation as a National Marine Sanctuary, and I still am. But there's been a lot that's happened with Mallows Bay in the last 3 years. Back in 2015, when the Chamber sent its letter of support, we had almost unanimous support for the designation at the original 18 square miles. And what we were trying to do was we were trying to have this designation ready to go for the 100-year anniversary of World War I. But something changed. The designation was enlarged. There were different alternatives. Our county went ahead and passed a resolution enlarging the Mallows Bay designation. In my role with the Chamber's Military Alliance Council, the military installations came to us and they said, why are we allowing our installation to be put at risk by enlarging the designation? We have active ranges. We weren't consulted, so we used our relationships, and we actually brought Lieutenant Governor Rutherford down, put him on a boat with the commanders from the installations, and took him for a ride, and allowed the base commanders to explain to them what the mission of the installations were and what the enlarged designation would do. And I am proud to say that a few weeks later, there was another resolution passed by our commissioners, reducing that back to the original 18 square miles. We'd already had the designation right now if we would have just stuck to the designation that was originally proposed. I'm a strong proponent of it. There's many, many stakeholders that have concerns, and it's my belief that with us bringing the designation back to the original 18 square miles, we'll see that very, very soon. Thank you very much.
Last answering this question is Henry Thompson.
As far as that Mallows Bay proposal goes from NOAA, I support the idea of promoting tourism and the other benefits we would get from sales of items and things that can go along with that area. The only problem is, what are we going to do about that zone around there? Everybody's always talked about the Indian Head Navy base, but don't forget we have Stump Neck across the river on the other side of Virginia. We have Quantico and some other bases over there. We really don't want that zone that large. That zone has to be made smaller in that area that encompasses around that Mallows Bay designation. That zone has to be smaller in order for our military bases to not be put at risk. Don't forget, it's an irritation to many military bases, not just Indian Head. So Stump Neck's included, Dahlgren's included, and so forth. So we need to be very careful about how big that designation is on that Mallows Bay.
Thank you all. I want to bring up, there's still lots of seats up front if anybody needs a seat. And on that aisle, I just want to make sure there's room to pass, but feel free to fill in up front. All right, my next question for the 4 candidates. So we talked a little bit about Mallows Bay as giving a boost to tourism. What about other forms of agro or ecotourism? What would you recommend, and what forms would you support for Charles County?
First answering this question is Brian Claus.
Charles County is a beautiful place to live, and we have talked ecotourism for decades. But I do want to use an example of a project that was slated for ecotourism where we have dropped the ball. 25 years ago, Chapman's Forest over on the western side of Charles County was purchased for $28 million, 2,800 acres of land right outside the municipality of Indian Head. And at the time, it was going to be Chapman State Park. It was going to be a world-class, smart growth project that was traded off for the purchase of that land to turn into a park. Now, some of us here have visited Chapman State Park, but the amount of money that was promised from designating that a state park and the benefit of tourism and ecotourism from that has resulted in boarded up communities, and we just found out that we're losing our Safeway in Bryan's Road. I believe tourism has a place in our local economy and we should support it, but we should not trade off better opportunities for economic development and higher paying jobs in the quest for tourism or ecotourism. Charles County is an expensive place to live. We should focus our efforts in economic development around high-paying, career-focused employment and still promote our tourism and ecotourism opportunities. Thank you.
Next speaking will be Reuben Collins.
One of the most recent and important decisions by county government was to actually hire an individual that would act as the director of eco-business and agribusiness opportunities. Agribusiness provides tremendous opportunities for potential economic growth for the future of our county. One idea that I proposed is the idea of establishing through agribusinesses international trade opportunities with other nations that may be more rural in scope. And it would provide an opportunity for our farming industries and farming opportunities to work directly with nations outside of the United States to develop an actual partnership, to look at how, for example, our knowledge of agriculture could assist developing countries, for example. There's plenty of examples of these type of partnerships. My ideas are to jumpstart and expand our economy. Too often when we talk about business development in Charles County, we maintain the same posture that we've heard over and over again. But our challenge is we're competing with the Washington region. And so it's incumbent on us as a community to begin thinking outside of the box and looking at potential ideas for economic development that will expand our local economy. So of course, the idea of agribusiness development and ecotourism, they provide potential opportunities, but I see the opportunity for our government to look at ways to expand our local economy. Thank you.
Henry Thompson will be talking.
As far as the agribusiness goes, I want you to encourage the continued use and visitation to the farmers markets. For a long time we had just the market in La Plata and the one in Hughesville. Recently, Indian Head decided to start one, and I believe Port Tobacco is also starting one up. Those farmers markets are important because they provide an outlet for our local farmers who are small that can promote their wares to the public. The other thing to consider is the microbreweries in the area. The microbreweries need to have different kinds of grains and hops produced so they can produce their products also. We need to encourage that type of business also because the microbreweries are a big interest to the tourist industry as well. So producing those type of products and encouraging outlets for them to be sold at is an important option that we have to help our county. Thank you.
Closing out this question is Peter Murphy.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, one of the first things that we did in county government was to create a new department, and we put tourism in that department because we recognized the potential for tourism as an economic development tool for us. As I mentioned earlier, we are so close to the DC area. We're only an hour away. And the people that spend the money, they want an experience. And Charles County is so rich in terms of what we can offer folks. Just last year, we had 1,000 cyclists that came to Indian Head, 1,000. Those weren't Charles County residents primarily. Those people came from throughout the area. We also have the watershed, Mattawoman Watershed, Mattawoman Creek Watershed. Tourism is linked to land use. We have these bass tournaments. We don't have one this year. We will have one year. It's for disabled veterans, I believe. Next year, we're due to have 2 more. Those bring in over $1 million in a weekend that they're here. And where does that go? It goes into our hotels, it goes into our restaurants, it goes into our gas stations and so forth. We've got to make good land use decisions to make sure that that continues. We just struck a relationship and an arrangement with the Department of Natural Resources in the Chapel Point State Park. They're going to let us lease about 50 acres of that so we can open up that waterway to more of our residents and to more kayakers and to more fishermen and women and so forth. So my point is, we have tremendous opportunity in this county. And to not consider tourism a major piece of economic development is a mistake. And so we have committed in this administration to expand our economic development. We're looking at all sorts of things, but certainly tourism is one of them. And ecotourism is certainly growing all the time. So we do encourage that, find ways to promote that. Thank you.
All right, the next question. So the Chesapeake Bay Foundation called the 2016 Charles County Comprehensive Plan the most environmentally responsible land use guide in Maryland. Do you agree or disagree? And is this a good thing?
Peter Murphy will also be starting this question.
Thank you. I think the one thing that we want to keep in mind here, and you'll hear a lot about it, and I think this maybe is why they indicated that, is a watershed conservation district. I want to be really clear about that because there's so much misinformation going around about that and what that really means. As a government, we have a lot of things to consider. We have to consider our overcrowded schools. We have to consider whether or not how the congested highways. We have to consider our water supply. So when you make decisions, you have to address those things. The Watershed Conservation District addresses those things. It does, in fact, restrict sprawl development that contributes to all those things. However, you can still have commercial operations in there. You can still build schools in there. You can still build churches in there. You can have all sorts of economic development things because those don't add to the overcrowded schools. They don't add to congestion on the highways. They're not depleting our water supply. When you make these decisions, and I think maybe that's why they looked at it this way, you have got to look to the future. I'm telling you right now, I talked to a previous commissioner president some time ago, and I said, what are you going to do when we no longer have the water to support our population? And the response was, we'll just buy water from WSSC. That is a bad plan. We have got to look at ways to preserve what we have. And so my guess is that the reason that they consider this progressive is because we are looking forward. And it only does address the sprawl development. It does not address all those other things that I know people believe. It does not impact the commercial. It doesn't impact all of those, as I mentioned, all those different uses. There are pages of permitted uses within the WCD. It just means that you cannot build schools in areas where we don't have the infrastructure. I mean, build homes where we don't have the infrastructure for them. That's all that is. So my guess is, for the reason for doing that, it was looking forward, and sustainable growth is what we're trying to do here in Charles County. Thank you.
Next up is Brian Claus.
I am a member of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and I disagree with them. We all attended a candidates forum at the Chamber 4 days ago, and Commissioner Murphy shared with the Chamber that the Watershed Conservation District only affected, I think it was 500 properties, only affected 500 properties. That's a complete misunderstanding of the regulations passed against us. It affects every house in the Watershed Conservation District. An example of that is, say someone has a 1,000 square foot home. They are now restricted to how large they can make their home, 25%. They can only put on a small shed. And oh, by the way, if that shed exceeds the 8% impervious surface, they can do nothing. Every property in the Watershed Conservation District is affected. The ability to put a pool, sidewalks, sheds, those types of decisions that you, if you own a home on just 1 acre, should be allowed to make yourself, not restricted by your government. That's not a neighborly government. That's not a government that is your friend. And that is why I disagree with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Thank you.
Henry Thompson will be talking next.
I believe the Water Conservation District was too onerous and proposed too many restrictions on the current homeowners, as well as the next generation who tends to inherit that property as well. I fully believe that there should have been less restrictions imposed, and that the portions of the plan may have been beneficial to the environment, but there were some components that created this 1 house per 20 acres, which originally it started out as 1 house per 3 acres. And the numbers just didn't work out. There were just too many restrictions on the current homeowners and the next line that would inherit those properties. So I disagree with the overall WCD plan.
Reuben Collins.
The question was regarding the actual 2016 comprehensive plan. The plan itself is an ongoing process, but there are 2 elements that I think should be critically evaluated. First and foremost is the impact that the present plan has on economic development, commercial development on the western side of the county. That was the main concern I had in my initial look at the actual plan itself. It severely impacts the ability of the western side of the county to grow commercially. And particularly as it relates to the Maryland airport, the area surrounding the Maryland airport, and what was done to the tech center in Indian Head, or just outside of Indian Head. The result, and when we make these kind of decisions as a government, we have to recognize that there's always consequences to a decision that you make. President Murphy emphasizes that this is an attempt to ward off sprawl, but at what effect and at what impact? All the decisions we're making in terms of zoning are severely impacting the Waldorf area, if you really think about it. And when you talk about growth, and when you talk about overcrowding in our public schools, those public schools that are overcrowded are in the Waldorf area. They're not in the western side of the county. And I think that needs to be emphasized. There's always consequences. There's always consequences that are a result of decisions that you make. Now, a conservation district in and of itself is not a bad thing. In most instances, it is fundamentally sound.
Thank you all. There's still some chairs up front, and I see people standing in the back. All right, next question. We've been residents of Charles County for almost 25 years, and I've seen the population grow significantly since we first moved to the county. I'm wondering if we should be managing residential development or continuing to allow it to grow, and what are your thoughts and what do you recommend about doing so?
First speaking is Henry Thompson.
As far as the number of residences that are being developed and built, for every home that's built and every child in that home that has to go to school, it's $7,500 per year. If you have 2 or more children, it multiplies that number. That creates quite a burden on our finances for both the school district and the Charles County government, because the Charles County government ultimately finances the school district. I believe the best option to have is increase business production and the choices we have as far as the numbers of businesses that we license and allow to enter into the county, and allow more production of different types of corporations in the area. That allows more jobs and more choices for our citizens to work and stay here in the area. Building more houses is not necessarily the best option. I would prefer more to build more businesses. Thank you.
Reuben Collins will speak next.
You will not find one person that is running on the idea that they want to see more houses and more development. I mean, it's first off, it's not sustainable. And in any government, when you recognize the importance of developing your overall commercial tax base and how it actually impacts government resources, you understand from the very beginning that residential development creates a strain on local governments and their economies. We understand that. But the challenge will always be, how do we actually develop a measured approach to growth? There will always be some degree of growth. That we can't get around that. That's a reality. But it's important for us to understand fundamentally, when we make decisions about growth, how it impacts the entire county. And I stressed earlier, and I think it's extremely important, when we get into a discussion about how growth is impacting our county, and we place emphasis on one side of the county without recognizing how it's impacting the most urban and developed side of our county, then we're not really providing smart growth, no matter what those decisions that are being made, in this instance, on the western side of the county. We need to understand and recognize, as we continue to grow as a community, because If any of us come before you and suggest that somehow we don't want to see any more growth, we're not being honest. Because if this county actually stopped growing, that would mean the demise of our county. Growth, to some degree, recognizes the vibrancy of this community. And that's something we should be proud of. But the point is, and we need to understand very clearly, with ideas such as the Watershed Conservation District, it has an adverse effect and impact on the citizens of Waldorf, who are taking the brunt of overcrowding in terms of our roads and infrastructure.
Brian Claus will now answer this question.
As Ruben said, there's not of the 25 candidates running for commissioners here in Charles County, there's no one running on let's build more houses. But let's talk about facts. The facts of the matter is that we have built a lot of homes, and there are still a lot of homes in the pipeline. You hear talk about Docket 90 having been amended, and that the commissioners have reduced the number of units that will go into the old St. Charles, Lennar. We know that those are going to be 7,000 units that are going to be brought online in the next 20 years. We now know there's a new report out by Maryland Department of Transportation that 77% of our residents now commute outside of Charles County. Maryland has the worst commutes of every state in the nation, and Charles County has the worst commute of any county in the state of Maryland. We are bringing more and more people in. We haven't figured out how to make their lives easier. What we need to do is we need to completely change the way we think about how to affect quality of life here in Charles County. And that is a laser focus on economic development, bringing employment centers, hubs. There's an exciting project that has already been presented to the town of La Plata you drive one place, you park your car, and you spend your entire day there. And if you live in La Plata or anywhere in Charles County, you've got a 5-minute ride home. That's an exciting project. We need to re-engage big thinkers who are not afraid to think big again. But you have to change the anti-business culture of Charles County in order to do that. Thank you.
Peter Murphy.
Thank you very much. It's true, the growth certainly is part of our culture here in Charles County. I can just give you some numbers. In 2015, these are number of permits that were granted to single family. There are 527. The next year, 497, 479. They are in the pipeline, folks. They're going to be there no matter what you do. And we're not in the position of stopping growth. You can't. There's nothing healthy about that. It is true. But let's think about it. People aren't coming here because this is a bad place to live. They're coming here because they want to be here, because we have many amenities. It's a wonderful place to live. And we have to make sure that they're able to put their children in schools where they're getting good educations, where they feel safe, where they know that they can travel within the county. But you need a government that's going to make things happen and get things off paper. You know, for the first time in years, we're building and finishing Western Parkway. For the first time ever, we're putting a roundabout on Billingsley in Middletown. Because why? It moves traffic faster. It's much safer. I mentioned it earlier. Never have we gotten the kind of money, $13 million, to fix the intersection up at 301 and 5. That doesn't happen by accident. We don't get Greenberg and Givens in Charles County because we're not friendly to business. We don't get Lennar that wants to invest in St. Charles because we're not friendly to business. We lost the owner of Blue Crabs, but we found somebody else because they wanted to locate here. We just don't make a lot of noise about it, folks. We're out there doing this work every day. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to make these things happen, but they're coming. And so when you think about growth, the smartest way to go about it is that we need to work with the infrastructure that we have, because we cannot afford to continually raise your property tax rates to pay for all of these things that it brings. I'm telling you now, in the 4 years now, we've not raised your property tax rates once. We've not raised your income tax rates once. We have not. And we've still are able to maintain the AAA bond rating. We're still able to take care of our schools and our police and all those other things. And that's what comes with growth. That's what you want. You want someone to be able to work within the financial structure to make sure that all those things are available. So when you hear about Lennar, that's significant. They were entitled to another 10,000 units. And by the way, that didn't include senior living. But we worked with them, and they were willing to drop that down to about 7,000. 3,000 less units in that area is significant over time. And you know what else they did for us? They came forward and they said, you know what? For every house, we're going to give you a development fee of thousands of dollars. And you know what that goes to? Building new schools, because the state is cutting back on what they give us. These people aren't investing in Charles County because we're not friendly. They're here because they want to be here. They see a future. And we want people to come here, and we want them to live here, and we want them to enjoy all the amenities in this county. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask everybody to keep your next couple of questions. There's probably only time for another question or two because I want to save time for rebuttal and closing remarks. So let's try to keep this next round as short as possible. The Navy base in Indian Head, there's been some references to that today. It's been an important part of the county for more than a century. What can be done to ensure it will remain viable?
First speaking is Peter Murphy.
Very briefly, there are some things that we have done, and there's some things that we continue to do. Number one, it was Charles County government that made sure that the broadband went from General Smallwood down to the base. We did that. NAMO, a very important organization on the base. I just signed off about 2 weeks ago. $60,000 to lever a $600,000 grant so that they can be successful. I also signed off recently with $10,000 to leverage money so that they can move off the base. They want to have a small office. We talked about Mallows Bay. There are two things typically that the bases look at, or the DoD looks at for closure. They are encroachment and they are community support. Mallows Bay is a Navy shipwreck yard, if you will. And we have a Navy base. By supporting that, it shows that we respect the heritage of our naval force. So we've got to support that, and we have from the very beginning. We're making land use plans to make sure that we reduce encroachment, because there's only one way in and one way out, and that's 210. So we have, and also, for those of you know or may know, we hired John Bohannon. We hired John, who has there's nobody that knows more about these bases than John does. He has direct contact with Steny Hoyer. He's worked in the legislature, and he watches all of these things for us. So it is always at the top of our list in terms of how do we protect that base. And then we also have a couple other things coming up right now that we're still working on with the Department of Commerce on how to still reinforce our support of the base. It's critical to Charles County. We don't have Pax River, right? We don't have what Calvert County has, but we do have that base, and we have to make sure that it's viable and it stays, and it continues to grow. And we are doing everything in that area to make sure that that if and when another BRAC comes along, we will be in a position to be able to fight that off. Thank you.
Next is Reuben Collins.
I commend the work that's been done by the town of Indian Head to initiate redevelopment projects that will bring Indian Head back to hopefully the type of Indian Head that existed when I was a youth. Indian Head was actually on the western side of the county a bustling community and township. But during the course of the last 40 years or so, we've seen that area become more and more a desert in terms of potential opportunity. And that desert is spreading now to the Bryan's Road area. Why is that? Because of land use policy decisions that have limited opportunities in this part of the county. In Bryan's Road in particular, the county had for several years a project to create an actual sub-area plan for Bryan's Road, which would create like a town center. And I'm pretty certain most of the residents in Bryan's Road were unaware of this potential opportunity. It wasn't to provide or create some type of metropolis. It was an opportunity to make it more livable, a walking community where you would see less traffic actually going back and forth. Because coming back to the Bryan's Road area, I see how dependent people are on vehicles when you're on this side of the county, on the western side of the county, because you don't have any other opportunities. And that's spreading certainly throughout the western side of the county. In terms of the base, the point I'm trying to make is that by creating land use policy decisions that severely impact economic development in that area, it will have a negative impact on the future of the Indian Head base.
Next speaking is Henry Thompson.
I'd like to take up the issue from the standpoint of a young military person, like a Navy person or Marine who has to go in and out of the gate there at the Indian Head Navy base. How do you think they feel when they drive down 210 and they see all these closed up businesses there in that area? They don't have access to fast food things. They don't have access to amenities that they need that are appealing to young people. So they have to get all the way up 210 and go all the way out to 228 and either travel toward Accokeek or go toward Waldorf before they can find anything that's of interest to them. What happens if they have limited transportation and they can't go very far? And they go out the gate on a bicycle or something like this. You know, that does happen in certain cases. There's still nothing there within a short distance that they can either walk to or ride a bicycle to and attain some kind of break or relaxation from their military duties. If they don't like the base and they don't like the area, they're going to consider that a hardship tour, and they're going to start trying to transfer out and trying to leave from that area. That just makes the overall mission of the base much harder. The commander of the base can't access the people that he needs, and they're all trying to leave, and they're dissatisfied and disgruntled, and it just leads to a lot of personnel problems. The best thing to do is the Route 210 area there in Indian Head needs to have more businesses and more services available for those younger people who have to work on that base. Thank you.
Last is going to be Brian Claus.
I'm so glad we're able to talk about Indian Head tonight. The base at Indian Head in Stump Neck, my mom retired from Stump Neck, my dad retired from the base in Indian Head. It was the gateway to the middle class for our family. And it's a key and integral part of our local economy. So what you have to ask yourself is, when this Board of County Commissioners took over, and Indian Head being in the state that it was, what did they do? They went ahead and they removed all of the commercial and industrial uses around Indian Head. They failed to support Maryland Airport. Our Safeway is now closing. And then hats off to the United Way here in Maryland for providing a report to us. It's the Alice Report. Let me tell you about the communities right outside of Indian Head. Bryan's Road, 37% at or below poverty. Potomac Heights, 68% at or below poverty. Indian Head, 46% at or below poverty. So look at the actions of this Board of County Commissioners versus the rhetoric. And ask yourself, who is going to make the changes necessary to lift all boats here in Charles County? Thank you very much.
All right, I have one final question, and then we're going to move on to rebuttal and a closing argument from each candidate. So the final question. I'm one of the 60% of the residents of Charles County leaving the county each day to commute over an hour each way for my job in Washington, D.C. What transportation improvements can you recommend to ease the traffic, or what other alternatives do you have? Maybe to bring me back here and be at the Cove full time.
First speaking is Reuben Collins.
The most immediate approach to addressing the gridlock that exists within the county is to open the various arteries that exist within Waldorf proper. These have been projected, and the county has actually looked at an expansion of Post Office Road as an example to decrease some of the congestion in that area. This is part of the enhanced transportation program that has been in the county's records for nearly 2 decades now. In terms of the long-term approach and the approach that I believe will create and provide most dividends for our people is the light rail project, and a commitment to that with our state, local officials being totally committing to ensuring that light rail will become a reality. Too many of our leaders brush it aside and say, well, this will be something that's 20 years from now. Well, look at how long it took the Purple Line to come into existence. We have been steadfast. We need to continue to be advocates and to push the state. Unfortunately, Governor Hogan is not necessarily, and his administration is not necessarily fans of light rail for our community. But the reality is, we as a community have actually paid and invested in making light rail a reality. How did we do that? It's estimated that within the last 3 years, this county, because so many of us drive, have allocated to the Maryland Transportation Trust Fund nearly $100 million in funding, just from our county alone. And in order to move light rail forward, the county needs $27 million from the state to do an actual environmental study. And this is something we've already paid for as a community. If we advocate as residents, and if we put it at the top of the list for those that are running for governor, this will be something that will happen within the next 10 years if we maintain our position and advocacy for light rail.
Answering this question next will be Peter Murphy.
Thank you very much. The issue of light rail came up, and Mr. Collins is absolutely right. Governor Hogan doesn't support that. Pardon me? I'm sorry. I thought I said that. Anyway, the fact is that the light rail issue came up, and Governor Hogan tends to want to support more roads and so forth and not light rail. That hasn't stopped us. We are still moving forward with our Waldorf Urban Redevelopment Plan, because when it happens, and it eventually probably will happen, we're going to be ready for that. So we're still moving ahead to make that a more walkable, usable kind of community. But what's more important, and I think this is what people miss so often, we can stand here and talk about all the things we're going to do, and all the great ideas, and all the things that haven't been done. But no matter how smart you are, or any of us, or what good ideas we have, if we don't have relationships, we will get nothing. I promise you that. And so what any board needs to do, and I've been doing it now in terms of building relationships, is that there needs to be a very strong relationship, not only with our counties of St. Mary's and Calvert, but we need to be building a relationship with Prince George's County if we're ever going to get anything. Because that light rail, if it ever comes, starts in Prince George's County, and 2/3 of it is there before it ever gets to us. So my point to you is that it's easy to get up and talk about all the things that you're going to do. and what are the things that we're lacking. But the most significant thing about getting anything done is what are the relationships that we've developed with our state, with our federal government, and with our neighbors. So before we solve any, and here's a good example of this, 210. Any of you are going up 210, and all the construction that's going up in 210. That didn't happen by accident. That happened by the Charles County delegation working with the Prince George's delegation, working with the O'Malley administration to make sure that the funds were put into that so that that could be built. And that's going to alleviate a lot of the commuter traffic up 210, right? And so we have to work together, and so you don't want to underestimate the relationship part of this, please. Thanks.
Henry Thompson will now answer this question.
One of the issues surrounding the commuter bus system is if you were to take the bus and then arrive at work and a couple hours later another problem came up, your school called, your spouse called, there was some other problem, and you suddenly had to leave work, how do you get back home? How do you get back down here to Charles County? We need some kind of a system that if you are a regular user of the commuter system and our commuter buses, that some kind of minivan or smaller vehicle needs to be able to arrive at your place of work and pick you up to give you a ride back. That's not to be used on a regular basis, of course. This is just for emergency uses where somebody needs to get back home for some kind of a problem or issue that's occurred. Why is that important then? Because if people feel more relaxed about riding the bus and being able to get back to work, back from work to home in case of some kind of a problem that has come up, that will in turn increase the amount of riders on the commuter buses. The more people we have riding the commuter buses, the less traffic from small vehicles will be out there on the highways during rush hours. Of course, we may have to add a few more buses, but still, we need to encourage the use of the buses by making it more reliable for people to handle emergencies when they come up.
Closing out this question will be Brian Claus.
It is very true that in order to comprehensively fix our transportation problems, we have to have Prince George's County on board. But Prince George's County is worried about Prince George's County. I'll give you a great example. They just did a tremendous amount of development in Brandywine. And the opportunity to put an overpass where those lights are would have assisted Charles County, St. Mary's County, Calvert County with our traffic problems. That was not even discussed. That is how you fix problems comprehensively. I am very comfortable in talks with Senator Middleton and Delegate Patterson that the transportation issue here in Charles County will be addressed with the next Board of County Commissioners. Every year, every county is required to submit a letter of their priorities to the State Department of Transportation. Charles County has always been light rail. Light rail is number 14 of 15 for Prince George's County. And that was before they had National Harbor and MGM. Their desire now is to connect that asset they have with downtown DC. I think we need to look at realistic solutions. Buses are something that can be looked at short-term to assist, but it really comes all the way back to thinking about transportation differently. The model of having a light rail system where somebody gets on a light rail, where they go get on a bus, and then they go to work. No, we need to bring our jobs where we live. That is the low-hanging fruit, and that comes through successful economic development and a commitment to make that happen with employment centers, telecommuting hubs. We've got extra capacity right now in White Plains. We have tens of thousands of square feet that are sitting vacant. We need to have our Economic Development Department engage GSA, find out expiring leases, how many employees work at different agencies, and start talking with them to bring those jobs here to Charles County where technology now allows us to do them. Thank you.
All right, so we're running short on time, but I do need to give a quick shout out to our Facebook Live fans out there. Apparently, there's a lot of people watching, and they did have one last question. So I'm hoping you can weave in this question when you do your rebuttal, and after you do your rebuttal, we'll have a quick closing argument. So the question from Facebook Live is about this local area, and that's why I felt compelled, since we're in this district, in this area, to ask the question, and that's about Southern Park Community Center. And the folks out there on Facebook are asking about your thoughts about what we might be able to do to have either a community center or some facilities in that park. But this is really your opportunity to do rebuttal, so you can address that and then move right into your rebuttal. And thank you all for having such decorum at this debate.
First speaking is Henry Thompson.
As far as a community center there at the Southern Park, I'm not sure of the status of the sewer and water in that area. I'm not sure that we could have too much of a large facility in that area. Most of that land in there is good for ballparks and other types of uses that involve team sports and so forth. I don't know how much bathroom capacity is available in that area, so I'm not sure how much of a large facility can be built over there. So all of that would have to be looked into. I think it would require quite a bit of research to answer that problem. I know where the area is and everything, but I'm just not sure what can be actually produced in that area.
We'll also have closing argument. Yeah.
Next is Reuben Collins.
My rebuttal is a continued discussion on the issue of light rail, because I think, again, and this is a classic example of when our community is faced with a discussion on how we move forward, we present counter arguments that essentially disintegrate the idea. First point I want to make with light rail: the potential that exists through transit-oriented development around the scheduled train stops that would be placed in existence would provide potential opportunities for increased economic development. As many of you heard, the county has a project. It's called the Waldorf Urban Redevelopment Corridor. It works hand in hand with this light rail project. The importance of it is it provides an opportunity for economic development, for mixed-use development in the heart of Waldorf. And in addition to that, with light rail, when you look at light rail projects throughout the nation, they created a boom for real estate within those communities. So the idea, and too often I hear people saying, well, you know, I don't want it because it's going to increase crime. But guess what? When you look at light rail projects such as in Charlotte, North Carolina, and another community I can't recall right offhand that recently established light rail in their communities, you saw an increase in economic development and real estate prices increased as a result. It's an opportunity for us to be forward-thinking, and the final point I wanted to make with this is in terms of partnerships. During my first term as a county commissioner, we established a strong relationship with Prince George's County. And I give credit to the President Board. They took that partnership further. And now, in addition to having the support of Prince George's County with this priority, this transportation priority, we also have as a partner St. Mary's County, because St. Mary's County residents understand the importance of bringing light rail to this community. It can be done if we are committed across the board with all of our leadership to make this happen. and it will provide opportunities for economic development in our future.
Peter Murphy.
All right, I'll just briefly, on the Southern Park, nothing's come before us in terms of putting any recreation center there. I would suggest, and I don't know this because it's more than the Board of Education, but we have two schools down here. We have Pickawax and we have Higdon, and oftentimes our schools act as community centers, and they may or may not be a community center. But if they're not, I think it would be worth talking to the Board of Education to see if those schools, those playgrounds and so forth, could certainly be opened up for the community. But that would be a Board of Education decision. That's not a commissioner decision at all. We've heard an awful lot tonight, folks, and it's a very different perspective when you sit where I sit than where people that are looking in. It's very easy to talk about all of these things. It's very easy to talk about the Safeway. You know, when the Safeway closed, I heard that I was on Facebook, that was my fault. 5 years ago, I brought the lobbyists down, the Safeway lobbyists, and I said, there's a problem with Safeway. You need to work on that. 5 years ago, this started. And the bottom line is, there was not enough, people were not shopping there. There are just not enough people to make money. They put a Starbucks in, it went out. They put a bank in, it went out. They made a business decision. It had nothing to do with land use. It has nothing to do, and I want to stop this right now because it's a negative thing about Charles County, nothing to do with theft. That's not our community. That was not in the decision with Safeway. It was a business decision. They were not making enough money there. And the other thing I heard from people that live on that side of the county, that's a food desert over there. Excuse me, there's been a food line there for years. And so my point is that where I sit, we see much more than, and know a lot more about these kinds of things and have to make decisions on that. When I hear that about the Alice report, they're very good about going out and giving all these figures. Those are back in 2014. Those aren't the figures that we live with today. Those aren't the figures that we use to make decisions off of. And when I look about the Maryland Airport, let me tell you about the Maryland Airport. I've been in office for almost 4 years. I've asked since I've been there, bring me a business plan. Talk to me about what you want to do there. I have yet to see a business plan. Yet has anybody ever come to us, to county government, and said, this is what we want to do there. Because when people do, we work with them. It's how we got Greenberg and Gibbons. It's how we got the new owner of the ball team. It's how we got Lennar. When they come to us, we say, what is it that we can do to help you? But if they don't bring it forward, if they don't come forward, this is your money. It is not the Bank of Charles County. So we don't just willy-nilly give that. You've got to come with a business plan because we're responsible to you for this money. We have a budget every year that we have to balance. So I hear a lot of things about, and jobs. Everybody talks about bringing jobs. Of course, that would be a wonderful thing to do. But you know what? The very first thing that our Economic Development Department has to address when they are out, and I'll tell you one of the things they're doing, they've identified a number of companies in D.C. area that want to expand. It's too expensive in D.C., so bring them to Charles County. You know what they want to know? What are your schools? What is the safety factor? Do you know that in Charles County, we are number 2 in the state of Maryland in terms of how we support our police? Number 2, no one spends more money on public safety in the state of Maryland than we do except Baltimore City. That's a plus. But they ask about our schools and they ask about our transportation. They want to know, what land use are you doing for us to locate here? So when you hear all these things, they sound good, and it's what we all want. But the practical part of it is that, number one, we only have a certain amount of money to work with. This year alone, with all the requests that came in, it was $17 million more than what we had of everybody that wanted extra things. If we gave them that, we would have to vote to raise your taxes 7%. Nobody wants that. So we have to work with a very different set of facts than the kinds of information that you get when you go to these types of forums. And frankly, look, when I ran 4 years for this, I was in the same position. I talked about the same things. But I tell you, though, when you're sitting in this position, we can only work on facts and data, and it's mostly driven by dollars. And so I'm very proud to tell you that in the 4 years that we've been in office, and I mentioned it earlier, we haven't raised your tax rates. The previous administration raised your property tax rate 3 times in 4 years. They raised your income tax 1 time in 4 years. We haven't touched it. And we still maintain a AAA bond rating. And when Wall Street looks around of all the countries and they look at Charles County and say, this is a county we want to invest in, this is a sound county, this is the one that we know these people are going to pay their bills, that's something to be very proud of. And so I'm very proud of the record that we have over this last 3.5 years. Thank you.
Brian Claus.
I would like to address just a couple of issues in my rebuttal phase. As it relates to the work, the Waldorf Urban Redevelopment Corridor, that project was supposed to have started last year. If you go to the Department of Economic Development's website, you'll see that they were supposed to have started phase 1 in 2017. The only thing that's been done over in that corridor is all of the zoning. All of those properties have been downzoned, and now those property owners sit. And they wait. Because most know that light rail is not coming. Now, we can talk about we need another $27 million for another study, or we can be realistic. We've already done 5 studies over the last 30 years. We need to rethink what that transportation corridor looks like over in Waldorf. I want to use the example from when I worked in Reston. When I worked in Reston, all of my employees that worked for me lived in Reston. Their quality of life was so much better. We can do the exact same thing here in Charles County. In regards to the Safeway, in my belief, is leaving because we have so many people that leave out of our county every day. It used to be my mom was home when I got off the bus, when she worked in Indian Head, and you could go to the grocery store at 3:30 or 4 o'clock. You've got people that now get on a bus at 5 a.m. and they get home at 8 o'clock. They don't have time to spend money in their community. You can't support businesses that need a critical mass of people to survive if they spend most of their time away from their house. And then lastly, I want to talk about the Maryland Airport. The difference between the next Board of County Commissioners and the current Board of County Commissioners is I will be proactive in directing the Department of Economic Development to go to that asset and tell them how to make it successful. I won't sit back and wait for years for somebody to bring me a business plan. We have so many people. We now have so many people working in economic development that is their job. That's how you improve everyone's life, by being proactive and seeing a problem and finding a solution to it. Thank you very much.
All right, so we've gone over our time, but I did want to give everybody an opportunity to do closing remarks. I also want to let everybody in the audience know that we will remain open for at least an hour after the debate. A quick pitch for Chef Foster in the back. I know he has been cooking. And he has some incredible food if anybody wants to stay for dinner. There's also the bar and the coffee bar. So for your final closing remarks, you each, I'd like to keep it to 2 minutes if possible, just because I feel like We've gone a little over. Is that okay with everybody? If you need to go over 2 minutes, not too much over 2 minutes. And Ms. Face? Okay.
First will be Peter Murphy.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all very much for coming tonight and staying and listening to this. I hope it's been helpful and informative. I would just say that as you look at the next election, whether it's this board, whether it's all the other races, Charles County really matters. It's an important and incredible place to live. And it's important that you choose people who have experience. And when you certainly look at this board, when you look at this position, the president of the Board of County Commissioners is like the CEO. This is a person that's responsible for a $400 million budget to make sure that that is sound and balanced. You wouldn't hire somebody for that position that had no experience. You wouldn't. You would never do that. That's a lot of money. That's your money to be able to manage. And for those that do have experience, you want to look at them and say, how did they use that experience? And how did they balance that budget? And how did they make sure that our teachers got paid? And how did they make sure that our police got paid and so forth? It's the major part of what we do in this position, certainly as president. So experience is absolutely critical. The other thing that I talked to you a little bit about is relationships. You cannot get anything done if you haven't spent a lot of time developing relationships with individuals, whether they're at the local level, particularly at the state level, because we rely so heavily on their support, and somewhat the federal. That takes a lot of time to develop those relationships, because the very cornerstone of that is trust. They need to know that when you come to them for a project or for money or whatever, that you are good for your word. And you are someone who's going to take that and you're going to make it work and you're going to follow through on that. That's critical. It's absolutely critical. And that doesn't happen easily. It takes time to build those relationships. And then the other thing I want you all to keep in mind, this is not a full-time job, a 40-hour-a-week job. Charles County really is an amazing place, and it deserves the utmost attention. It's a 60 or 70-hour-a-week job at least. And so in my case, it is all I do. It is where I've committed myself. And I've been doing that not only when I was in the legislature, but I've done it here. So keep that in mind, that we are deserving and entitled to someone who can commit and give their full time to a place that is as rich and deserving as Charles County. Thank you.
Next is Ruben Collins.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening. This was, as usual, very engaged. It was an opportunity, I think, for our citizens to hear directly from those who seek the presidency of the Board of County Commissioners. I ask that you support my efforts to become president of the Charles County Board of Commissioners. I believe I bring to this job a local pedigree and also experience. But I want to make it clear, with that experience, I've never actually presided over Charles County government. That's where I'm asking for your support, to actually start right from the very beginning with a well-thought-through agenda to move our county forward for the future, to actually move forward on projects that are already in existence, which would provide jobs, the infrastructure projects that I mentioned earlier, and in addition, to think outside of the box and to recognize that we are competing with other businesses, with other governments in the Washington metropolitan area. And we simply cannot continue to think the same way and expect somehow that we will move forward and we will be able to create more in terms of revenue to pay for teacher salaries and to pay for law enforcement. We have to think a different way. We have to recognize that the future will require broad and very aggressive thinking for the future. And the final thing I'd like to say, as a community, we need to be consistent in our approach. Too often in our community, we look at potential projects and then we allow ideas that could provide for our future to unravel, and then we do nothing in the future. And so I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak today, and I ask for your support. Vote for me, Reuben Collins, President of the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you.
Next is Brian Claus.
Thank you, Faith. I ask for your vote in early voting and on June 26th to be your next Commissioner President. I love Charles County. I am Charles County. I love the fact that I was born here, that I was raised here, that I joined the military from Charles County, and more importantly, I'm so glad I came back, established my family, raising my children in Charles County Public Schools. This county has so much to offer us, but there's so much more that we can do. I'm focusing on quality of life, protecting our environment, and providing economic empowerment to all of our residents. Charles County is a phenomenal place to live, but not if you can't afford to live here. There are so many that have been left behind because we have failed to focus on the most important issues. Our quality of life means we have to have high-paying, career-focused jobs. We must always protect our environment. We do those things that make our neighbors feel like we care about them. I'm running for your next Commissioner President because I care about each and every one of those things. And I ask for your vote on June 26th. Thank you very much.
Last will be Henry Thompson.
I was waiting throughout the night hoping that one of the questions might pop up in relation to the airport. Our Maryland airport that we have is similar to many other small airports throughout the state of Maryland. However, due to the management that those other small airports received, they create hundreds of jobs in their little areas that they have. Our Maryland airport there at the corner of Bumpy Oak Road and Livingston Road has a big problem with the zoning that's around it. So it's kind of encompassed, it's not able to expand, and our airport is unlike most of the others in the state. It only produces about 6 jobs in that area. However, when the tech park was supposed to be across the street from it there, just to the southwest of where the airport is located, some sewer and water lines were built in that area using your taxpayer funds. Along Livingston Road, you can see fire hydrants and some other pipes and things coming out of the ground. However, none of that was put to use because it was originally intended for the tech park. The tech park didn't come to fruition, so the pipes were left there. They'd already been built and installed, so there's really nothing anyone could do with it. What needs to happen is we need the zoning around the airport changed so we can produce some businesses that add to the environment there at the airport. We need to have more corporations come in and more businesses. While they're there building buildings or building structures, they can hook up to that water and sewer that's already there. That way your tax money that was used to pay for that service is already available. This is another good thing that could happen to the airport because when that occurs, it'll also produce a few more jobs for that area of our county. I'm hoping to see each and every one of you in June for the primary and for November for the gubernatorial elections, and I hope that you will consider me during your vote. Thank you.
All right, with that, I would like to thank everybody for coming here this evening. I'd also like to acknowledge that there are a few other candidates in the room. I know that Amanda Stewart is here, and I know that I believe there was another candidate, and I'm sorry. Sorry, right. Thank you. Thank you. I apologize. I don't know everybody. Oh. Yes. Thank you. And Jason Henry's in the back. I see you, Jason. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate the attendance here this evening. I appreciate all of the candidates. Please feel free to stay, mingle, meet some of the candidates, talk to some of the folks that are here, and enjoy our food. Thank you.